My name is Daniel. I am 34 years old now, but when these events happened, I was 22. I had just moved out of my parents' house and needed money to pay rent. I found a job listing online for an overnight cashier at a large gas station. It paid slightly more than minimum wage. At the time, I thought it would be an easy job. I figured I would just sit behind a counter, drink coffee, and read books. I had absolutely no idea what the night shift actually meant. The gas station was located off a long, flat stretch of state highway in Arizona. It was situated about 30 miles outside the nearest town. There were no other businesses around it. There were no houses, no streetlights, and no neighbors. It was just a square, flat-roofed building surrounded by empty desert and scrub brush. During the daytime, the station was always busy. Long-haul truckers, families on cross-country road trips, and local construction workers constantly came in and out. But at night, the entire atmosphere of the location changed. The transition always happened around 11 o'clock. The sun disappeared, the highway emptied out, and an extreme silence settled over the property. Working the late shift from 10 at night until 6 in the morning comes with a heavy psychological weight. Your body naturally wants to sleep, so you are constantly fighting a dull fatigue. The building is incredibly quiet. The only sound you ever hear is the mechanical hum of the large drink refrigerators against the back wall. The compressors turn on for about 20 minutes, humming loudly, and then they shut off with a sudden, sharp click. When they shut off, the returning silence is actually much worse. You start to hear the building settle. You hear the wind hitting the roof. You sit there in the harsh fluorescent lighting, staring out the front windows into total darkness. It feels like you are sitting inside a glowing fish tank. Anyone standing out in the dark desert can see you perfectly, but you cannot see them at all. My specific work area was an enclosed cashier counter located near the front doors. Because the station was so isolated, the company had installed a security booth. It was built directly into the corner of the room. The walls of my booth were floor-to-ceiling reinforced glass. A thick wire mesh was embedded inside the clear panels. It was designed to be shadow-resistant. Directly in front of my register, there was a metal transaction drawer built into the counter. It was a heavy sliding tray. Customers would put their snacks and cash into the tray, and I would pull it through to my side. To talk to customers, there was a small circular intercom speaker cut into the center of the glass at head height. On the left side of my small space, there was a heavy, solid steel door. It was the only way to get in or out of the security booth. It had a thick deadbolt on the inside. When my shift started and the evening manager went home, I would lock that steel door from the inside. I was not allowed to open it again until the sun came up. I spent my entire 8-hour shift locked inside a space that was roughly 6 feet wide and 4 feet deep. I had a cash register, a stool, a small trash can, and a silent panic button mounted under the counter. The thick glass and the locked steel door gave me a strong sense of safety. I believed that as long as I stayed inside my box, nothing could hurt me. That was a false sense of security. It was an illusion. It happened on a Tuesday night. The temperature outside had dropped significantly, and the store heater was running constantly, blowing dry air into my booth. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I was sitting on my stool. I had finished all my basic cleaning tasks hours ago. The coffee pots were empty and washed. The floors were mopped. The cigarette racks were fully stocked. I was just staring at the security monitor mounted in the top corner of the booth. The monitor was split into 4 smaller screens, showing live video from different cheap cameras inside and outside the store. At exactly 2:14 in the morning, I noticed a movement on the top right screen. That camera pointed directly at the 4 rows of gas pumps under the large metal canopy outside. A vehicle had entered the camera frame. I had not heard it pull in. That was the first detail that made me feel uneasy. Usually when a car pulls off the highway at 60 miles an hour, you can hear the heavy tires crunching on the loose gravel near the entrance. I had heard absolutely nothing. The second detail that bothered me was the lights. The car had no headlights on. It was a dark, 4-door sedan. It looked older, and the paint was covered in a thick layer of pale dust. The car rolled very slowly under the bright white canopy lights and sit in freezing, dark cars at 2 in the morning without a reason. They do it because completely quiet store. It sounded aggressive. The man stepped inside onto the tile floor. The doors slid closed behind him. Now that he was inside the building, I could see him clearly through my security glass. He looked to be in his late 40s or early 50s. His face was deeply lined and weathered. His skin was pale and covered in a thin layer of dark grime. But it was his eyes that made my breathing suddenly become shallow. They were wide open. You could see the white space all the way around his dark pupils. He was not blinking at all. He completely bypassed all standard customer behavior. He did not look toward the bathroom signs. He did not glance at the candy aisles or the drink coolers. His head snapped toward my booth, and his wide, unblinking eyes locked directly onto my face. He began walking straight toward me. His heavy boots made soft thudding noises against the linoleum floor. He walked all the way across the store and stopped exactly 2 feet away from the security glass, directly in front of the metal transaction tray. He stood there perfectly still. He did not say a word. He just stared at me. His mouth was slightly open, and I could hear his breathing picking up through the small intercom speaker. It was wet and raspy. I forced myself to step forward back to the counter. I knew I needed to act normal. I leaned toward the microphone on my side of the glass. "Good morning," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. "Can I help you find something today?" The man did not respond to my greeting. He did not even acknowledge that I had spoken. He just kept staring at my face. His gaze felt heavy, like a physical pressure pushing against the glass. The silence stretched out. The only sounds in the entire building were the buzzing refrigerators and his raspy breathing coming through the speaker. After about 30 seconds of unbroken eye contact, he slowly leaned forward. He leaned in until his dirty face was only inches from the glass. His breath fogged up the thick pane. He finally spoke. His voice was not a normal speaking volume. It was a harsh, dry whisper. "Are you the only one working here?" he asked. That is the absolute last question you ever want to answer truthfully when working the graveyard shift. Company policy trained us to always lie. "No, sir," I answered immediately. "My manager is in the back office doing inventory right now. If you are not going to buy anything, I need you to leave the store." The man did not blink. He did not even acknowledge that I had spoken. He just kept staring at my face. His gaze felt heavy, like a physical pressure pushing against the glass. The silence stretched out. The only sounds in the entire building were the buzzing refrigerators and his raspy breathing coming through the speaker. After about 30 seconds of unbroken eye contact, he slowly leaned forward. He leaned in until his dirty face was only inches from the glass. His breath fogged up the thick pane. He finally spoke. His voice was not a normal speaking volume. It was a harsh, dry whisper. "Are you all alone?" he asked. My heart began to pound again. I felt a cold sweat break on the back of my neck. He was not just a random traveler passing through. He had been sitting out there in the dark desert, watching me sit inside my glowing box. I reached my hand under the counter and rested my fingers directly on the edge of the silent panic button. "I am asking you to leave right now," I said. I dropped the polite customer service tone entirely. "If you do not leave, I am calling the county sheriff." The man did not step back from the glass. Instead, he raised his right hand. He placed his open, dirty palm flat against the security glass right in front of my face. He left it there for a moment, pressing hard. Then he slowly dragged his hand down the glass until his fingers reached the metal transaction tray built into the counter. He pushed his fingers into the small gap under the sliding tray. He was trying to get leverage on the locking mechanism. The tray was secured from my side. He suddenly pulled up on it with extreme violence. The heavy metal rattled loudly. He was using a massive amount of physical strength. I could see the muscles in his dirty forearm tightening and shaking. He was actively testing the physical barrier between us. He was trying to find out if there was a way to force his way into the booth. "Hey!" I yelled loudly through the microphone. "Stop doing that!" He stopped pulling. He let go of the metal tray. He slowly turned his head to his left. He looked directly at the solid steel door that led into my booth. He knew exactly where the entrance was. He turned his entire body away from the glass. He started walking slowly toward the steel door. He walked directly to the heavy steel door. I slammed my thumb down hard on the silent panic button mounted under the counter. I held it there tightly. The strange man reached out and grabbed the brass handle of the door. He turned it sharply. It was locked securely, but he did not let go. He started violently shaking the heavy handle back and forth. The heavy metal mechanism rattled loudly inside the steel frame. The sudden noise was incredibly loud and startling inside my small, quiet space. He then slammed his thick shoulder hard against the solid steel door. The solid door did not move a single inch. He hit it again with his shoulder. Then he suddenly stopped. He stood perfectly still for several long seconds, breathing heavily against the cold metal door. He finally turned around. He walked out of the store exactly the same way he came in, moving with stiff and extremely slow steps. The glass doors slid shut behind him. He got into his dark, dusty car and drove away down the empty highway without ever turning his headlights on. The local county police arrived 20 minutes later, but the strange man was gone. I never saw him again. But that frightening incident was only during my first month on the job. The harsh reality of working the night shift in a desolate place was just beginning to fully set in. 3 weeks later, I experienced an entirely different kind of terror. Being locked inside the safety booth was frightening when someone was actively trying to get in, but being locked outside the booth in the open air was much, much worse. Strict company rules required me to empty the large trash cans located out by the gas pumps every night at exactly 3. The main dumpsters were located at the very back edge of the large property. They sat on a wide patch of loose gravel, positioned exactly where the bright white canopy lights ended and the pitch-black desert began. I absolutely hated this specific task. I had to leave my safe, enclosed space, lock the heavy steel door behind me, and walk outside completely unprotected. I only carried the heavy brass master key and a thick plastic trash bag. One specific night, the temperature was freezing and the wind was blowing hard across the flat landscape. I dragged 2 heavy bags. I dragged the bags out toward the large metal dumpsters. The dry gravel crunched loudly under my work shoes with every single step I took. The area felt completely isolated. I lifted the heavy bags and threw them hard over the rusty metal rim of the dumpster. Then I heard it clearly. Another set of heavy footsteps, crunching slowly on the loose gravel. I instantly froze in place. The unfamiliar footsteps immediately stopped. The dark desert surrounding me was completely silent, except for the howling wind. I told myself it was just an echo of my own heavy work boots. I thought it was my imagination playing a trick on me. I took 3 cautious steps back toward the brightly lit store. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Behind me in the darkness, 3 distinct heavy steps perfectly mirrored mine. Someone was intentionally walking exactly when I walked, deliberately trying to mask the sound of their silent approach. I spun around quickly. The open area past the large dumpsters was a solid wall of total blackness. I could not see anything moving in the dense desert brush. My heart started beating so hard and fast that it actually hurt my chest right then. I turned back toward the store and began to walk much faster. The footsteps right behind me immediately sped up to match my new pace. They were definitely getting closer. I did not run because I desperately did not want to trigger a chase instinct, but I walked as fast as my legs could possibly carry me. When I finally reached the very edge of the smooth concrete parking lot, I looked quickly toward the 4 rows of gas pumps. A tall, dark silhouette stepped out from behind the thick concrete pillar of pump number 4. It was a person. The person was entirely dressed in dark black clothing. They had intentionally positioned themselves directly between me and the front glass doors of the store. They were quietly waiting for me to approach. I stopped moving. The dark silhouette stood perfectly still under the bright, harsh lights of the canopy. I had the brass master key tightly gripped in my sweating right hand. I realized quickly that I had to run completely around the large pumps just to reach the front door. I took a deep breath and sprinted hard. The dark silhouette immediately lunged forward, taking fast, long, aggressive strides directly toward me. I reached the automatic glass doors first. They slid open slowly. I rushed inside the store, ran frantically to the heavy steel door, shoved the master key violently into the lock, and threw my entire body inside the small booth. I quickly slammed the heavy deadbolt shut and locked it. I was panting heavily. When I finally looked up at the security monitor screen, the bright parking lot was completely empty. The person had vanished back into the dark desert as quickly and silently as they had appeared. That incident permanently changed my daily perspective forever. It taught me to constantly look over my shoulder. But my final encounter taught me that sometimes hiding inside the enclosed safety booth is simply not enough to protect you. It was late November. It was almost 4 in the morning. I was reading a local magazine behind the store counter. Suddenly, the landline phone on the wall gave a short, strange ring and then went completely dead. I picked up the heavy plastic receiver. There was no familiar dial tone. The line was completely silent. I quickly checked the credit card machine. It displayed a bright red error message. The main internet connection was entirely gone. I pulled out my cell phone from my pocket. The small digital screen showed 0 bars of cellular service. I was completely cut off from the outside world. A deep, heavy feeling of intense dread washed over my entire body. Gas stations lose power or internet connection sometimes, but losing the landline phone, the digital internet, and cellular service all at exactly the same time is never a simple coincidence. Someone had intentionally tampered with the main utility boxes located on the back exterior wall of the building. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from my direct left. It was a sharp, hard noise against the thick security glass. I quickly turned my head. A tall man was standing just outside the front of the building, pressing his pale face directly against the large front window. He was looking directly into my small booth. He was smiling at me. It was not a friendly or normal smile. It was incredibly wide, strained, and entirely unnatural. He had a very large metal wrench firmly gripped in his right hand. He deliberately tapped the heavy steel tool against the glass window again. Tap, tap, tap. He wanted me to know that he was there. He wanted me to fully understand that I was trapped inside. I reached under the counter for the silent panic button. I pressed it down hard, but without a working phone line or active internet connection, the silent alarm system could not send an emergency signal to the local police dispatch center. I was completely isolated and alone. I had absolutely no way to call for help. The smiling man slowly walked away from the large front window. He moved directly toward the main automatic sliding glass entry doors. I watched closely. The doors did not open for him. I had firmly locked them from the main control panel inside my booth over an hour ago. He grabbed the thick rubber edges of the sliding doors and aggressively tried to force them apart. His pale face turned a dark red color from the intense physical effort. The heavy locking mechanism groaned loudly under the pressure, but it held tightly shut. He finally let go and stared directly at me through the dirty glass doors. His wide, unnatural smile was completely gone. He slowly raised the heavy metal wrench into the cold air. He smashed the wrench forcefully into the center of the glass door. The loud impact was incredibly shocking. The thick, reinforced glass cracked heavily instantly, but it did not shatter completely. He hit it again, and then he hit it again. I backed away slowly into the absolute furthest corner of my enclosed booth, shaking uncontrollably in extreme fear. I quickly grabbed a heavy metal flashlight from the bottom storage shelf. It was the only physical object I had that could be used as a weapon. He finally realized that the strong safety glass was not going to break apart. He stopped hitting the damaged glass. He slowly walked back to the large front window, directly across from my enclosed booth. He simply stood there, firmly gripping the heavy wrench, and just silently watched me. He did not attempt to leave the property. He stood entirely motionless in that exact same spot for 2 entire hours. He would occasionally tap the metal wrench against the thick window glass just to remind me that he was still waiting there. Every single time he tapped the glass, my entire physical body flinched in terror. The slow psychological torture was absolutely unbearable then. I had to simply stand there, feeling completely helpless, constantly wondering if he was eventually going to try to break the thick glass again, or if he was patiently waiting for me to eventually come outside. I intensely watched the analog clock mounted on the white wall. 4:30. 5 in the morning. 5:30. The slow minutes painfully crawled by in total silence. I absolutely did not sit down on my stool. I never took my focused eyes off him. Finally, at roughly 6 in the morning, a very faint gray light slowly began to appear on the horizon. The morning sun was finally coming up. Almost immediately, a massive commercial delivery truck pulled quickly off the adjacent highway and rolled very loudly into the parking lot. The sudden hiss of the large air brakes echoed sharply across the quiet property. The man standing at the front window looked over at the massive truck. He slowly looked back at me for one last time. He quietly turned around, walked slowly around the dark side of the building, and completely disappeared from my sight. When my daytime manager finally arrived for work at exactly 7 in the morning, he found me sitting silently on the hard floor of the small booth, still tightly holding the heavy metal flashlight. He immediately saw the heavily cracked front doors and quickly called the local police. They thoroughly investigated the property and found the main utility boxes completely smashed open with a heavy wrench. The thick internal wires were intentionally cut. If I had foolishly walked outside to casually check the sudden power loss, he would have been quietly waiting for me in the dark behind the building. I firmly quit my retail job that exact morning without any prior hesitation. Remote locations remain strong magnets for dangerous fringes of society who desperately wish to remain unseen by normal people. Those deep psychological scars never truly heal completely. If you are currently clocking in to a lonely graveyard shift as the evening sun begins to set, please listen to my final warning. Do not ever trust the night. Do not ever assume that you are truly alone. Always lock your heavy doors, because the terrible truth is that the thin glass window separating you from the absolute darkness outside provides nothing more than a fragile illusion of true safety and security.